All right, let's open with prayer then. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day that you've given us, Lord. We thank you for the opportunity to gather in your house to study from your word this morning. Pray that you'd guide and direct in everything that's said and done in all the different classes, Lord. Pray that you'd be with the teachers in presenting the material, give them wisdom, give the kids and students and adults understanding for the things of your word today, Lord. We just pray all these things in Christ's name. Amen. All right, so we'll start off in 2 Peter chapter 3, because that's where you talk about Noah. Second Peter chapter 3, verses 3 and 4. Wife, could you read that for us, please?
Knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lusts, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation.
All right, this is where we started off last week, and I think possibly the week before, right? Where everything is the same as it's always been, right? Going all the way back to creation is the thought there. But we know that since creation, we've covered things that have changed, right? We've had the fall in the garden. We've talked about that. We've got Noah and the flood, so that situation has obviously changed, right? We've got the curse. We've got all those things that came from that. So is everything actually the same it was since it was created? No, right? We've gone through several things in relation to Noah. We've proved that Noah is a real historical account, both out of the Old Testament and the New Testament, right? There's plenty of documentation for that. We've talked about last week, we got to look into a little bit of how the ark was actually constructed. We got to watch a little video on that, and the scale and the size, and an idea of what it looked like. Is that necessarily what it looked like? No, there's no proof of that. Noah did not leave the blueprints behind, so we're stuck with imagery at this point, right? Okay, so that's what we've got there. But we do know that you could actually build a ship that big. It just has to be of good quality, right? Not some of our cheap China ships, right? So we can't have that. Nothing from Walmart today. All right, we talked about our animals, the number of animals that were on the ark, the number of animals of each kind, right? And we've, as Peter pointed out, dogs are unclean. So thank you, Peter. Remember that. So now I always remember that. It's stuck in my head now, right? Dogs unclean. So why do we have them as pets? Interesting. So today is kind of a conglomeration of little bits of things that didn't necessarily fit into other lessons. We're supposed to talk about the Ice Age today, so hopefully we'll get to that at the end, because that's a fun topic. But we'll get through some of these other things first and hopefully wrap up Noah today. So let's take a look at Genesis chapter 6. Genesis chapter 6. So when you think of Noah and the flood, how do you envision that happening? I think it was Clint last week. You said rain, right, Clint? Sounds plausible, right? It rained. It rained for 40 days, 40 nights. How do you envision this whole flood scenario happening? What picture goes through your head, Shirley? Mm-hmm. So how do you cover the whole world in water? What picture goes through your head? Evan?
I picture just it raining alone, and then it slowly fills up. But I know that's not the case. I know there's waters from below that would come up, and that's how. But in my mind, I always picture lots of rain.
Sure, that's what you think of, especially growing up in Sunday school, right? Because what were you taught? It rained for 40 days. So that's the big picture that's in your head. That's the big information that's in your head. Chuck, you had your hand up.
You already mentioned the fishes from the deep. That's the primary source, at least from the science of it, from creation scientists.
Okay. Peter, you had your hand up.
Same thing, there must have been great earthquakes though, because it cracked the whole crust. Well, the whole world was shaking. Things were probably falling down. It wasn't, I don't think something sleepy that happened.
No, not a peaceful misting for 40 days and 40 nights? No? No, Darlene's up there with thunder. Yeah, there you go.
The water canopy
You like wind? Wind? High winds, so way up top. Way up top winds.
Thunder and lightning.
All right. There's Randy's image. It's a huge mess. I like that. Right? Because that's not typically an image that we think of, right? Or that's not the image we're given as kids. We're taught it rained for 40 days. But let's take a look. Genesis chapter 6, verse 17. Let's start there. So, Evan, why don't you start us off there?
And behold, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth, to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life, from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die.
All right, so what do we know about our flood here? What's told to us about our flood?
It'll destroy all flesh.
Okay, we knew that already. Come on, Evan, give us new stuff. What's interesting there? Okay, well, everything under heaven is being destroyed. So it depends on how you're reading that, right? Is it the waters that came from, or is it what's being destroyed, right? So hang on to that. What else? Peter? Oh, yeah, he's definitely doing it. We know that. But what interesting little tidbit. What's one letter at the end of a word that's interesting? Why? Why is that interesting? Ah, very good. Now we're thinking, right? It's waters, right? There's that S on the end. Okay? Genesis chapter 7, verse 6. Can you read that then for us, Ben? 7:6. Okay, so what happened there? There's that S again, isn't there? We've got that flood of waters. Genesis chapter 7, verse 4. It says what, Mark?
For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living substance that I have made will be destroyed from off the face of the earth.
Okay, so we're talking about waters, we're talking about multiple sources. What is the first source of water that's given to us? Rain. That was easy, everybody knew that, right? Every little kid who sits through Sunday school knows, well, it rained. Okay? How long? 40 days. 40 days and nights. Now, can you get a good flood with 40 days worth of rain? Evan says no. Peter says yes. Why does Evan says no?
Not enough to cover the world.
Not enough to cover the world, he says. Randy.
It's all the Lord's.
Oh, see now, Evan, it's all in the Lord's hands. Oh, ye of little faith. Right? Okay. So let's see. The Hurricane Katrina that went through New Orleans. How long did that rain, Evan?
I don't know, 7 days maybe?
Okay. So now, were they flooded, Evan?
We're flooded.
They were flooded. So now, what happens if you do something like that all over the world, Evan?
You know, you might get some damage and some flooding.
Some damage, but not enough, right? Evan wants more. Evan wants more. Very good. Genesis chapter 7, verse 11. How's Elliot doing back there? Can you read that for us, Elliot?
second month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened.
Okay, so there's what's there,
Fountains of the great deep.
right? So we have fountains. What does that mean? What do you picture? Where's Shirley? She's my imagist. What do you picture when you see a fountain?
Water flowing up from.
Like one of those big ones that shoot up with, like music, that are set to music?
Little one.
Oh, a little one? Evan wants more.
More, think geyser, surely.
Yeah, I think geysers,
All right,
right?
all right, that's all.
Well, let's think about that for a second, right? We've seen volcanoes before, right?
Yeah.
Pent up pressure. And then once it gets that little crack, what happens? Boom! Right? Okay, so how's this water coming up? Because Evan wants more and Randy wants a huge mess.
Rocks flying up on your head.
Rocks flying up. Well, that's not pleasant, right? Okay. What's interesting, though, there's another S at the end of fountains, right? Goes back to our pluralness, right? So there's more than one fountain going on here, right? Fountains of the deep, right? What else is going on? What else is mentioned there?
Windows of heaven were opened.
What does that mean, Clint?
It sounds like it started raining and then it really started raining.
All right, so the windows of heaven are opened. All right, let's take a look at that. 7, that was 11. Okay, very good. So Genesis 8:2. Genesis 8:2. Peter, can you read that for us?
Fountains also of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained.
Okay, so what do we have going on here? What sources are listed for us? Fountains, windows. Yeah.
Rain.
And the rain. So we have 3 sources going on here. We have rain, we have the fountains of the deep, and we have the windows of heaven that are opened. All right, so we have 3 sources of rain that are happening here. All right, one of the common theories, and I think Evan mentioned it before, is the canopy theory, right, where there's a barrier of water that was in the atmosphere, and that has been opened and released onto Earth, right? So another, all right, did that happen before? No, right? That's what God tells Noah. Didn't happen before. But yet in 2 Peter, it talked in 3:4, they're mentioning how, everything's the same as it's been since creation. Wow, people haven't been paying attention much, right? Okay, so there's a lot of different things going on here. So you got fountains of the deep, windows of heaven that were stopped, and the rain that was restrained, right? So how do you think this happened? What goes off in your head now that you're thinking flood? Randy wants a huge mess. But if you think, now, it depends on where Noah's Ark was built, okay? If Noah's Ark is built in a flat area, and you get this big wall of water, tsunami style, coming in, what's happening to Noah's Ark? It's getting washed away, right? It doesn't matter how good the thing's built, it's taking some hits there, right? Okay? But what if it's built, say, in the mountains? Or in a hilly area that has a barrier to it? Then what happens? It's lifted. Okay, so it kind of depends on where it is, right? What do we know had to happen with the flood? Did it happen quickly or did it happen slowly?
Quickly.
Why?
Because if it was slow, it wouldn't destroy everything. You wouldn't have
Well, if it
dinosaurs-
just
you wouldn't have
builds up.
dinosaurs and everything buried quickly and preserved.
Oh, okay, so you're talking your fossils now. So you need your fossils in order to have that be preserved. We know that that has to happen quickly, right? Okay, so that's where you're going with that. Why else? Why else? What else feeds into Mark's theory of quickly? Rick?
Well, a lot of
Yeah.
And you're gonna have fossils all over.
Okay. So we're thinking fossils, we're thinking erosion. What else? What else would support that? Think about you. What would you do if you were there, Randy?
My faith in God and hope that it was a tsunami would protect the ark, no matter what, how big it was. God is there protecting the ark.
Okay, sure. Noah's inside. He's fine. He shuts the door. God seals him in. But now you're on the outside. What are you thinking, Evan?
Well, it would have to happen fast, because if it happened slowly, people could react and like do something about it. But if it happens so fast, that it says it will destroy all flesh. If it happened fast, there'd be no time to prep or do anything.
Exactly. Think about that. If I was on the outside, right, and the earth is wicked and filled with violence, right, and you start to see, what is this rain thing going on? Wait a minute, that's what Noah said. What are you going to do?
Build a boat.
Really? Really? Is that what you would do?
No, you wouldn't have time.
What would you do?
Well, higher ground and maybe try to get on the ark.
Scale of the ark, yeah.
Right? You're going to get on the ark or? You guys are too Christian. Stop thinking Sunday school. What would you do? Mrs. Housley, what would you do?
I would try to grab.
What if you can't? What would you do?
I'll try to ride to the mountain.
Oh, wow. 2 Sunday school in here. Ben, what would you do?
Probably knowing that, it's starting to rain, Noah has something to say, boom, I try to get on the ark. It's probably really is the only hope.
So now, doors closed, you can't get on the ark. What do?
On top.
Okay? Wow, you guys are too Christian.
Probably, like, if I can't get on there, I'm just going to destroy it.
Thank you, Evan. Right? That's what's going to happen, right? Well, think about who you're dealing with here. The earth is filled with violence and is wicked, right? Noah's been warning this population about what's coming, and wait a minute, what's all this noise? Okay, the door is sealed, I can't get on. You know what? I'm taking the ark out. If I can't get on, ain't nobody getting that way, right? Maybe it's just me and Evan, but, that's where my mind went. All right, so yeah, it did have to happen quickly. What?
How are you going to do that?
Well, he's got construction equipment laying around. So he's got an axe, he's got a saw, right? All you need is a little hole. That's just me. Randy?
Just me, I just repent and say, God, I'm a sinner. So forgive me. Accept me. I can't control anything. I'm going to die here. So help me, please, Lord. And
I bet that was not their thought at that point, right? Just like the rich man and his brothers, ma'am.
I've heard it said that there weren't mountains back then. So it's interesting to see fountains of the deep. So there obviously was something that was deep, but maybe not as deep as they are now. So if there wasn't mountains, we couldn't be running to the mountains.
Sure.
Your comment about hills, maybe there were hills, I don't know, but there's really nothing about, like,
There is.
later in the Bible, it talks about going up to the mountain for your sacrifices, but in Cain and Abel, they didn't go anywhere. They just said, they didn't have a mountain to go up to, I would think. I don't know if that's true or not.
That is most likely not true. Yes, because remember we talked last week how the water went 15 cubits above the mountains. So now where do we go? Genesis 7, verse 20. 15 cubits upward did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered. So there were mountains there. Now, are the mountains then the same height as your mountains today? Probably not. Okay, but they still were considered mountains. Yes, you did have the fountains of the deep because we did have seas. So yes, there are seas. There is lower because that's where the water goes. And then there was higher. Okay, so there is something there. Like I said, were they the same? Are they the same mountains we have today? Because I think Peter mentioned the shifting and the earthquakes, and that was you? Yeah, there is a lot going on there, and that's what leads into, well, maybe we can just do it now. Our Ice Age stuff, right, is the amount of seismic turmoil that was happening then. Because in order to get the fountains of the deep, it's got to be broken up, which is what the word says. Well, how broken is broken, right? Is it just a little crack and it all just seeps out? Or do we have a huge mess like Randy wants, right? It's probably more the huge mess, right? What happens afterwards is we know in the rock layers at that time is there's a ton of volcanic ash. Well, how did volcanic ash get there? Right? Volcanoes, right? There is a ton of volcanic activity that was happening after the flood, right? There were a ton of videos that go along with this Ice Age class, but most of them were sciencey and boring, so I spared you that. But if you want information on that, I can get you that, all right? There are three causes to an ice age. One, obviously, is you need cooler weather, right? One is you need moisture, and one is you need time. Because, well, it's an ice age. It's not an ice month, right? Okay, thank you. I'll be here all day. So what happens then is after the flood, scientists say that the average temperature of the oceans, 86 degrees, right? That's like nice swimming pool weather right there, right? That's 86 degrees. Who can tell me what it is now? It's less than 40.
There's ice on the river right now. So
Yeah,
37.
right? The average temperature of the ocean is less than 40 degrees. Okay? Rick, you had your hand up.
How would they know though, back then?
That had those thermometer thingies? No. Let's see. Due to the way the Ice Age models work, that's the temperature it would have had to have been in order to create the way things spread out. For a less boring video version of that, that's the best I can give you. But it's basically their backwards computer modeling of it. Okay, so you can take how far it spread over how deep it was. What do you have to have in order to generate that? And a lot of that comes from the warm oceans. Both creation scientists and secular scientists go that way. So without watching the boring video, that's the best I can give you. All right. If you want the video, I can show it to you.
It makes sense, if there were volcanoes or whatever they were that cut up to make the fountains, it would warm up the water.
Yeah, there was a ton of volcanic ash, and that's what's interesting about how it made the world cooler. It doesn't have to be cold. It doesn't have to be frigid all the time. It just has to not melt. Right? So there's a difference there. So the summers are drastically cooler, so your stuff doesn't melt, but your winters are warmer. So you get the moisture, the warm moisture, that then snows a ton, and then that never melts. Think about your mountains, your ice caps, those types of things. Antarctica, right? There's stuff under there somewhere, right? That's what's going on there. But it just doesn't melt. Randy.
About what people would be like, I think they'd be desperate and not knowing what to do, just like today.
Yeah.
They wouldn't know why is this happening, and they wouldn't understand it.
So one interesting thing about, okay, if you have your globe, right, and drawing, You have, us and South America and, right, right. Okay? There's a good portion of this that was covered by glacier. We know that. We see the effects of it. Wisconsin was covered by glacier, right? I've made fun of Darlene before because she saw them, right? Right? A lot of Wisconsin was carved up by glaciers, right? Okay. Now, what's interesting then is that the world then looked hugely different than it does now, right? Because of the weather patterns that were there, because of this ice there, the Salt Lake area, there was a Bonneville Lake. There used to be a lake there, Bonneville Lake, and it was like 800 feet deep. Where's that? That's gone, right? The desert that was there, the African Sahara Band, that was all watered, right? You're like, where'd all that sand come from, right? Well, that wasn't there before. That was watered, right? But then as gradually this melts, why? Why do you think we even had the Ice Age in the first place? Peter.
Some of this I'm going by Kent Hovind's on his theory.
Sure.
But if there was a canopy,
Yeah.
it was like a tropic all around
Yeah.
the globe. He surmises possibly a meteor hit it and broke it. That would bring the cold because to freeze these mammoths with their food still in their stomach, they'd have to freeze within so many hours. So it needed to get bitter cold for a little bit. And also, then the world wobbled for a while because when the top gets hit,
Oh, yeah.
then it comes, so it's not straight up and down anymore, it's tilted.
Yeah.
Where before it was straight up and down, and because of the canopy, everything was uniform.
Right.
Now we get seasons, which the Bible does say would happen after that. So I think then when the Ice Age came like that, as it melted, and that's where the early people could go to different continents because they were connected.
Uh-huh.
And then the oceans rose up too. So it's a whole different world.
It is a whole different world, isn't it? Abby, you had your hand up.
I was gonna say, even today, the storms that you have, well, it's all based on water temperature and air temperature. So if you have the catastrophic upheaval that's sudden,
Yeah.
you're gonna have a vast dynamic of change in
Yeah.
weather and landscape, everything, because it's just been turned upside down.
Very good. There's a lot of good stuff that's been mentioned there. You've got, you've got volcanoes, right? And the amount of ash that gets put into the air and how much that changes global temperature for months at a time, right? We've seen that by single volcanoes, Pinatubo, Krakatoa, those guys, right? There was Mount Tambora in 1815 that went off, right? And it screwed up 1816 as far as crops go across the United States and Europe, right? That's one. Set it all off around, say, our Pacific Rim, and what happens, right? So you add the cooler summers to the warm ocean waters, and what do you get? You get a ton of precipitation. But if it's cool enough, it doesn't melt, and it builds up. They're talking about we see what's left of the glaciers. You're talking thousands of feet deep. Thousands of feet. That's tall, right? That's your own mountain, right? And things going on there.
Could have also had sunspots not on the sun. Because
Yeah.
the sunspots make it warmer, and when you don't get that,
That makes a huge difference too.
that makes a difference too. So it could be the sun.
Right? And now if you take that and you add to Peter's, okay, wait a minute. The earth we have then, before the flood, is not the same shaped earth we have after the flood. Right? What happens when volcanoes go off? Why do they go off? Pressure. Okay. What happens with volcanic eruptions? What's the rumbling called? Right? Earthquake. So there's a lot of shifting, right? Where our mountains today the same exact mountains we had then? No, right? Peter?
Well, they say where the crust cracked like that, then the upper layers of the crust actually slid, and that's when they ran into resistance from
Yep.
the other direction. That's where the mountains went up.
Yep. How do you get Hawaii?
Volcano.
Okay, so stuff is different, right? We've seen from earthquakes in our lifetime, right, how it changes the axis of the earth. A little bit, a little degree, right? That's all it's needed. What happens when you change the axis of the earth? Just a little bit. Does your weather stay exactly the same? It can't. Right? It can't. One of the things then too is, if you think about it, is all this source of water that's 15 cubits above the mountains, right? Where'd all this water go? How, Peter? The oceans are flooded, Peter.
They say if you take and flattened out the earth, there's enough water in those oceans, we'd be like a mile deep of water.
So how do you get that, Peter?
Well, it's sunk. Psalms and other places talk about the low places sinking down, the mountains going up, and the water runs off.
Okay?
The lower part.
So think about our God, right? And the order that is in the universe, right? What keeps our planets from crashing into each other? Right, his hand. Okay, this is where you belong, right here. On this orbit, that's where you belong. You stay there. Okay, so if you had a planet, I'll start this off by saying this is all me. Grain of salt. That's where my head goes. All right, if you start off with a planet, right, and you've got its current size before the flood, right? And you've got the canopy around, and it's got its size, it's got its gravity, it's got its orbit, right? And then you break that canopy. What changes? Size of the earth, right? Okay. So now it's all covered by water, right? So how do you keep it in its same orbit? What do you have to do? Okay, so you've got earth and canopy, right? And now this just breaks, right? And it all comes crashing down, right? I don't know how big the canopy was. Who knows, right? So now you've got this water ball there, but you got to get rid of the water and keep your same orbit. What do? Nobody knows what you do.
At first, I want to point out that the mass of the earth stayed the same.
Okay,
Nothing really left, it just went elsewhere.
right. Except now if it's
With all this
dense,
seismic activity, those fissures got deeper.
okay?
There was a place for the water to go that hadn't been there before.
Well, no, because that's where the water came from.
But it was locked in.
Well, now it's not locked in.
Right, but the face of those surfaces have changed, just like
Sure.
on land.
But the water didn't go back there. Otherwise, you never would have been able to flood it.
Well, it didn't all evaporate because there was a huge
Okay,
mass.
so where to go?
I know, but if you had that much water up in the atmosphere,
Yeah.
you'd have a canopy.
Right. So where to go?
Windows were opened.
Yeah.
Doesn't the
The water
Bible
has to
say
go
it
somewhere.
receded?
Since it's not on land, it's below land.
How did it recede? Where to go? Okay, so guess. This is Ben's grain of salt now. Where to go? That's all this is. This is all huge grain of salt. Where to go?
Well, if it receded, it had to somewhat go back to where it was. So
How?
fountains of the deep were broken up. Some of that water probably went to there. And the landscape was changed so much that the oceans were a lot deeper and the water receded.
Why? Why were they deeper? Clint wants in. Clint.
Well, if you got all these volcanoes blowing up everywhere, all that lava's coming out, that's gonna leave a gap.
Okay.
So maybe the water went in where the
Okay.
There's a lot of land shifting.
A lot of land shifting. Why?
Pressure. There's all that water pressure, and maybe it's uneven.
So what's happening with the land shifting?
Mountains are being formed by water pressure, possibly.
Rick?
That canopy gone too, I think it'd be more evaporation.
There is some evaporation. We have to have evaporation, otherwise we don't have weather patterns, right? So some of it had to go there. You're right. But where does this whole ton of water go? How does it recede?
More lakes and rivers,
How? What happened?
just through all the change in the surface.
Think about it. With all this seismic turmoil, what's happening?
Probably have new land formed and the oceans are much deeper.
Why are the say it again?
God separated the land from the water.
What happened? Pulls apart. Right? Why does it look like all our stuff fits together? Right? But think about that. If I had, well, I don't know how else to do it. If I had, Earth, right? And it's got all this water on it, what do I have to do to Earth to make the water fit so there's still land? You got to create gaps. You got to make it bigger again. Okay, so we had our small Earth with our canopy. Everything crashes down, but yet I got to stay in the same place and I got to get rid of all this water. So I got to make Earth bigger. Whoop. Water goes down. Water recedes. It's a huge grain of salt. It's in my head. I don't know. Could be totally wrong, but that's where my head is, right? Keeps you on the same orbit, right? That stuff stays the same because now you're that same size again. Water recedes because it didn't go, it didn't do that. That'd be crazy. Well, that'd be funny, but That's like when you're a kid and you think, what happens if it just snowed the couple of inches all at once? That'd be funny. But it's not practical. But it would make a huge mess like Randy wants. So, goal there, right? One of the interesting questions that I always had too was, you had oceans, right? Were the oceans freshwater or saltwater? They're saltwater, okay. So rain, is that freshwater or saltwater? Freshwater. So you flood the earth with saltwater or freshwater?
Flooding it with both, actually. Well, I suppose it could all be freshwater. What's coming up out of the fissures could be freshwater.
Okay, so Bob doesn't know. Nuts, Bob.
There's already salt water there.
Salt water there. So you got a big sea of salt water at least, right? And then you got a whole ton of fresh water. We're assuming canopy, probably fresh water. Okay? Otherwise you get salt pellets. That's no good. We don't want that. Right? So now you have a flood of everything together. How does it separate out? How does only fresh water end up in our rivers, but only salt water in our ocean as the water receded? How does that happen?
The rivers are coming from the deep. They're not, and the oceans are catching everything, and as the rivers go through the land, they're picking up.
But as you're flooding, right? You got your flood. As you're receding, how does it separate out? Right? Because before they were separate. During the flood, they're together, and now you got to separate them again. So
The Dead Sea does have salt in it, and so does Salt Lake. And there are.
But why?
places that-
because there's no outlet for it, right? So what happens? How does it sort out? Peter. Rick wants in after you.
Salt water is heavier, so the fresh water being top, it may evaporate, go back to the clouds, the cycle we have now. Salt water would slide down heavier into the lower parts of your ocean. Plus the water that even the rain today, through our rivers, it goes into the oceans carrying the minerals and the salt off the land
There you go.
into the ocean.
All right, Rick?
However it happened, God did it.
Oh, come on, Rick.
Big filter.
That's the Sunday school answer.
He dumped it on the salt flats.
He had angels going around just skimming the stuff off. Put the salt over there. We didn't plan this out. Yeah, that's the Sunday school answer. I don't know, God did it. But Peter's right, and we talked a little bit about this last week, is that salt water and fresh water, they don't mix, right? There's, especially like in South America, there's the big freshwater rivers, and when they dump out into the ocean, it's a line that you can see, well, this is where salt water starts, and this is where fresh water ends, right? Fresh water floats on salt water. So the stuff that's going to be evaporated first, like Peter was saying, is going to be your fresh water, which works well for us with rain. So that's good that way. All right. So what else? Let's see. Oh, interesting point is that outside of the global flood, scientists have no idea how to do an ice age. Right? They have no idea how one starts. Right? They can't come up with a plausible way to kick one off. Right? Outside of a global flood scenario with all the moisture that I erased and the coolness of the summers and that type of thing. They don't know how to start one. Well, then you would have had an ice cube age, right? So, Randy, go ahead.
What we're doing is trying to fight the secular world with their answers. Because we're all believers. And we're saying, okay, this world is saying this can't possibly happen. We're trying to come up with answers that we believe kind of react to that, fighting against the constant battle you're dealing with on every day. People say, that's not right. Couldn't possibly happen. We're trying to answer that.
Yeah.
But really, we're coming here because we all know it did. We're just trying to figure out a way it did.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you're talking with people about anything, right? They'll come up with, well, what about this? How do you explain this? If not evolution, then what? Right? Okay, you say global flood. Sure. Where's all the dinosaurs? Right? How do you explain that? Well, how do you explain the Ice Age? Right? Well, okay, much like scientists today, they can't explain what's going on. It does. Yeah.
And you have people that say there is no God, so they got to try and manipulate the same evidence that everybody has to fit their idea.
Yep, very good. Let's take a look at Genesis chapter 9. As long as we're talking about there, perception, right? That's an interesting word that we've got going on here. Right? Perception. Genesis 9, verses 8 through 16. Bob, can you read that for us, please?
And God spake unto Noah and to his sons with him, saying, And I behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you, of the fowl, of the cattle, and of the beast of the earth, with you from all that go out of the ark, to every beast of the earth. And I will establish my covenant with you. Neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of a flood, neither shall there any more be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, This is the token of the covenant which I made between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come to pass, when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow shall be seen in the cloud. And I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And the waters shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. And the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it, that I may remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is upon the earth.
All right, so what is this? What is this? What was just given? Covenant? Got a promise? What's the token? Rainbow, right? Okay, so we talk about our perception, right? Everything that God does, think about Isaiah chapter 14, right? Where it talks about Satan and the 5 I wills there. What is Satan's ultimate goal, right? He wants to be like the Most High, okay? So everything that God does, he has a counterfeit for, okay? It's weird how diametrically opposite it is. It's not creation, it's evolution. Right? It's not salvation by grace, it's not a free gift, you got to work for it. Right? Everything he does is opposite. It's twisted. Okay? What did God just give us there? The rainbow, right? You know, the only time the rainbow, the word itself, is actually mentioned in Revelation chapter 4 once. Only one time above the throne of God. Right? So, what does Satan want to do with the rainbow now? Twist it, defile it. How so? How is it used? Okay. What are the colors of the rainbow? Roy G. Biv, right? Do you know the colors of the homosexual flag? They got 6. It's not 7. It's not the 7 colors of God's rainbow. It's man's twist, Satan's twist on what's above God's throne, right? Which is interesting. They take out indigo, I believe. Right? I don't know if you've ever noticed that, where, you know, there's the take back the rainbow. I don't want that rainbow. Right? So those types of things that if we're not paying attention to, we go, wait a minute. Well, no, it's different. You don't want that rainbow. You want God's rainbow. Right? So the things that God promises, Satan has twists for. Right? So we as Christians, like Randy was saying, we should have an answer. We may not know everything, but if we just come up with a Sunday school answer, well, God did it. I don't know. That's it. Well, when we're talking with people, that makes us sound dumb, honestly, right? Now, are we going to know everything? Am I picking on Rick? No. Are we going to know everything? No. But you can go, no, there is an explanation for it. I can show you the science video for it, but it'll bore you. So we'll keep it short, right? That you can just know that there is an answer for it and know how to find it. I tell my kids this all the time. You don't have to know all the answers for everything. You just got to know where to find the answers, right? Because you're not going to remember everything. Peter?
You also need to turn it around at them because they build their whole thing on a lot of assumptions.
Oh, yeah. They can't prove anything.
A lot of untruths. They can't prove anything.
They can't prove anything. Their garbage takes more faith than ours. Abby, you had your hand up.
Time and time again to people at the Access Center, sometimes it's just literally holding your Bible and reading it to them that is foreign to them.
Oh, yeah. They have no idea it's there.
How many comments have we gotten that, oh, you guys are just making this up, it's just not shooting from the hip, no, this is what God's
Yeah.
word says.
And that's why people laugh at you, because they want to bring you down to their level because they can't prove what they believe.
Exactly. And that's why in the big arguments in 10 seconds, they always say, well, take the Bible out of it. That's where all your answers are, right? That's where God gave you all the answers. And with that, we'll have to conclude our epic adventure through God's Word today.